Okay, I think we're live now. Okay, so today we have one of the most special guests I think I've ever had on this show. It's a woman by the name of Jessy, and she is probably one of the best success stories that we've ever had, probably in the history. I will say that you are not the first person to ever get married to your ex-boyfriend. I have done that one other time. She also made me a video testimonial, but I actually got Jessy to agree to come onto the show, so we're just going to pick her life apart. No, I'm just kidding. But we're going to ask her some questions and try to figure out what she did to successfully get her ex back, who is now her husband. So, welcome to the show, Jessy.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
So, I'm really curious, before we get into the relationship stuff, how did you come to the website? How did you find the website, and how long were you reading it before you decided, okay, I want to get my ex back? Or did you just come to it like knowing you wanted your ex back?
I stumbled upon your site knowing that I wanted my ex back. So I really can't tell you how I arrived at your site, but I know that I was
Probably
Googling.
Google, but
Yeah, I was Googling. And I was, of course, like the queries included things like how to get your boyfriend back. And you come across a number of different resources, but yours was the only that resonated with me because you had like steps. And I'm a very analytical person and I want something very concrete. I want to looks like, sounds like, feels like. And I got that from your resource. So I stumbled upon it. And then when I make certain financial decisions, although your resource is not, it's not going to break the bank. I appreciated the price point it was at. But I did sleep on it. And I always say to myself, if it still resonates with me the next day, then go ahead and buy it. So I found it, I slept on it, and then I purchased it the next day.
yeah, it's an interesting story. So let's kind of create a timeline here. When did this all happen? Do you remember, or is it like a year ago?
Oh, I remember it like it was yesterday because when we broke up, that's how painful it was. So we broke up in May, and the
May
reason
of
was
2015 or 16?
May of 2016. Good
That's
question.
when my birthday is. I'm so sorry.
Oh, well, it's okay because we came back together. But yeah, May of 2016 is when we broke up. And so I began my due diligence in terms of trying to find a way for us to get back together around that time. And so I stumbled upon your ebook and oh my goodness, the no contact period, which I'm sure you'll ask me about later on, that lasted for about a month. And then I followed that and we were back together by July.
Wow, pretty quick.
Yeah.
We've found in our studies one of the great things about our websites. We have so many people coming to it. It's like the ultimate like testing resource, so we can try different things out and try to really figure out what works to get an X back. And we've found like the average time it takes is right around 3 months. So you fell
Oh,
into the. So it's really interesting that you said that.
yeah.
Now, let's get into the relationship type stuff. Let's talk specifically about the breakup. So, what went wrong? Why did you two break up? And I guess we'll take it from there.
Great question. Well, I believe that there are always two perspectives. So I want to remind you, you already know this is my version
Okay.
of what really
We'll
happened.
hear a
But
different story from the husband later, right?
yeah, to ask him, I'm sure the embellishments or perhaps the details would be a little bit different. But we met about a year prior, and it was like an immediate connection. I had broken up actually with someone the night before, and the guy I'd broken
Wow.
up with. I know it's wild, but the guy I'd broken up with the night before said, "Well, let's go to happy hour for all time's sake. Let's just go and hang out once more, even though we're no longer considering a romantic future." Well, the very next day is when my now husband walked up to me and he just stood there. He didn't say anything. He stood,
It
and I
just
said,
stood
"Oh,
there.
you just stood there."
Got
He
some
called me.
game. He just doesn't have to say a
Yeah,
word. Just stands there.
that's that's exactly what he said. If you were to ask him, so um, from there it was chemistry, like indescribable chemistry. So over the next year, we knew that we had this like tangible love. We knew that we had something very, very special. But because this was a second, we both had one marriage already. We both had been divorced. I had been divorced for a little bit longer than he had. And so I was ready to move forward, and I realized I had a little bit more time to recover and heal and do all what you need to after a divorce. But he had less time, so he was kind of like panicky and freaking out. He
Mm.
wasn't sure if he wanted to get married again. We both had young children, and so I think he was just nervous. And also, um, I'm using the word counselor or therapy for lack of a better word, but I wanted us to get some sort of I just wanted us to just, I called it going inside and looking around, to just speak
Yeah.
to someone to make sure we got it right this time. Because apparently there's like a 70% divorce rate for second marriages, and
It's
I
pretty
did
high.
not want to get divorced again.
Yeah.
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 So that's what I wanted to do, and he was not interested. And so
I
that's pretty much what led to our breakup.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's this negative stereotype around therapy, but I had a few weeks ago a guy named Eric Newton on the show, and he said one of the most fascinating things that he's interviewed like over 200 couples. He has married 200 couples. So
Wow.
this guy knows what he's doing, right? And so I asked him, "Well, what's the secret? What are these couples doing?" And he said therapy, even when it's good. So it has to be like when times are super good. And he
Yeah.
kind of likened it to like going to the dentist. Like, you don't always go to the dentist when you have a problem with your teeth. Obviously you do if you have a problem with your teeth, but you just go in for like the mandatory cleanings. It's the same type of
Right.
thing. But I imagine if I were to put myself in your husband's shoes, I would think the same exact thing and start like thinking, wait, you're basically saying we have a problem, you know?
Right.
But sometimes it does take that outside perspective to open or bridge the gap, so to speak.
Right. It's
So,
funny that your other guest said that, because I liken it to like getting your oil changed in your car,
another
because
good
it's like
analogy.
that maintenance technique. But also, I had a different upbringing. So, in my mind, it, like you said, it had a different association with it than it did for him. And I had to be mindful of that. But it was also kind of a non negotiable for me.
Well, I also imagine too, so you're divorced already, and I hope you don't mind me going here, but I imagine you learned from the first divorce. Maybe you didn't have the talk or talk about the things that maybe you should have and maybe could have saved that particular marriage. So you
Exactly.
maybe didn't want it to happen for your next serious relationship, which happened to be your husband.
Exactly. That's
Okay.
exactly right.
So you break up, and we're assuming here that it's probably due to you wanted to go to not therapy, but maybe couples counseling. We'll use
Yeah.
it. It's a little bit more socially acceptable to say that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so he breaks up with you, correct?
No, I
Oh,
broke up with
because
him.
he wouldn't go.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. It was
So
hard.
So how did that breakup talk come about? Like, did you do it in person? Did you do it over the phone? Were you living together at the time? How difficult of a separation are we talking here?
Oh, you touch on a lot of things. We were not living together, although he did ask me to move in twice. And I said no, because my preference was to move in after I was married to
Mm,
someone. And I realize these are very modern times and plenty of people live together prior to marriage. But for me, it was important to be married prior to moving in. So I'm a little bit old fashioned in that sense. Um, and then, oh, the breakup. I don't remember if it was in person or over the phone, but I just remember saying I'm done. And I remember it being very painful. There were elevated tones and volumes with language. So again, I don't remember if in person or over the phone or via text, but I remember just saying I'm done. As
mm.
much as this hurts me, I'm done. Because a future of not communicating as well as we could was more painful to me than breaking up at that present moment.
No, it's interesting because so you came to our website specifically to try to win your ex back, right? So you
Yeah.
came with that goal in mind. Now, generally speaking, usually the person who gets broken up with is having that. So what's going on here? Did he try to get you back at all after the breakup, or was it all you sort of thinking, "Oh crap, I made a mistake"?
He didn't, no, he didn't try and reconcile things with me at all. And I also thought, oh crap, I made a mistake.
Okay, so a bit of
Um,
both.
yeah, it was equal parts of both. So while I knew I wanted to get back together, I knew I did not want to get back together under the same terms that we broke up
Mm.
for, or that I broke up with him for, if I'm going to be honest with that language. So, but yeah, great question. You're making me think about things that,
Sorry.
or And not in a bad way. I'm perfectly fine with this. Again, I'm okay with therapy, and a part of that is just examining things differently. So thank you for asking that.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm sure it'll get worse too. So buckle up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay, so you try to get him back. What's the thought process here? So you come to the website, and what I'm writing resonates with you, obviously, because I'm just awesome and great. So,
Yeah.
so what I'm writing resonates with you. What is the thought process here? So you read the stuff. Are you thinking, I need to follow every single one of these steps? Or did you just take, this sounds good to me, this sounds like it'll work, this doesn't sound like it'll work? Did you kind of follow the strategy step by step, or did you kind of put your own little spin on things?
Great question. I followed it step by step to the T. And
Wow.
I wanted to do that because of, I mean, you didn't promise miracles or anything, but I wanted to be able to kind of hold you to what you were writing about in your book. And I thought, well, if I follow it step by step, depending on the outcome, at least I'll know I followed it. So I guess I knew, I don't know, you just had compelling words. And I thought, if I follow this step by step, perhaps it could work.
Okay, so obviously the first step here is everyone talks about it, the no contact rule, right? So
Yeah.
you read about the no contact rule, and you were probably thinking, oh my God, this sounds so hard, right? I mean, that's what everyone thinks, right?
Well, I actually thought it sounded easy until I tried it. So I
It's-
attempted and
Everyone thinks that. That's what I've learned.
yeah. And I thought it was easy. I thought it was rather simple. But I attempted the no contact rule 2 or 3 times before I actually followed through with it. So I broke it a
Now
few times.
let's talk about that. So what happened to cause you to break it exactly?
Oh, because I was still angry and hurt, but in love. So I'd like contact him like, you forgot something at my house via text.
Okay.
Or well, no, he didn't contact me. That was painful too because
You're
I didn't. Go ahead.
you're probably reading all these success stories yourself and seeing all this success with the no contact rule, and it doesn't happen for you, so it's probably a little disheartening.
Yeah, well, what disheartening might not have been the case. The examples I remember reading in your book involved a lot of the other party contacting the person reading the book for various reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't the case with my now husband. He's a very rigid individual and he has a very strong will. So I later learned that in his mind, he was like, fine, if she's not going to contact me, as much as my heart is hurting, I refuse to contact her.
Sounds like me.
So yeah, you can have a lot in common.
Okay, so you failed the no contact rule a couple times. Now, one thing that I've learned is one of the steps I've taken over the years is I've taken all the success stories I've ever heard back from. And I'm sure there's a silent majority where people get their ex back and they don't tell me. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't get their exes back. But the ones I had, I took them all. I took all the success stories and I started looking at what these particular people were doing, what they had in common. And so one of the big things was the no contact rule. Like 70% had done the no contact rule on their ex. But they also had made like changes in their life in a positive way. Yeah. So did you do any of that at all? Are you in the majority or the minority here?
I think I'm in the majority, but I did it, I think, in ways differently than maybe some of your other.
Well, I'm curious to see, like, what changes did you make positively?
So initially I felt bummed because I heard other women and people like doing things for their communities and working out and getting their bodies in shape, and not in a pompous way. I was like, I don't really need to work out because I'm very satisfied with how I look. Mm-hmm. I was like, I have done and I continue to do like cool things in my community, things that bring me joy and fulfillment. But in my career is where I felt like I was lacking and I hadn't accomplished what I had wanted to. So I poured myself into sales training and personal development from a career standpoint. Okay. And so I hadn't heard any examples of that. So I wasn't sure if I was doing things well because I was fine with how I looked, satisfied with what I was doing from a humanitarian perspective. But career-wise, I felt very dissatisfied. So I poured into that.
That's really, really interesting because most people most women particularly, they're very obsessed with how they look, right? And so when I try to explain, okay, do the no contact rule, but at the same time, while you're doing the no contact rule, try to like divide your life up into these three aspects: health, wealth, and relationships. And most people, what they focus on is health related things like looking better, working out, eating healthier. Sometimes relationships like making new friends, going out, obviously focusing on their ex a little too much. Rarely do you hear anyone working on their career. So what strides did you make, like any significant strides, or was it more just a confidence type building exercise working on your career like that?
Great question. I poured a lot of money into career building. And my now husband, when he found out about some of the money that I spent on career and personal development, I think he was kind of happy that he wasn't around when I was like swiping my card at those times. For one of the things that I chose to do, don't judge, I definitely spent a handsome four figures, and he found out about it after after the fact. But I told him too, I said, in addition to what I use with you, I use some of the language that I learned in my sales training.
So it actually worked out for you. It's
Absolutely.
you can't put a price on happiness, you know?
You cannot.
Okay, so you've made significant strides during the no contact rule. Things are going pretty good so far, except he hasn't contacted you. Now, one of the big questions that I always get pretty much every single day is, should I contact him first, or should I wait for him to contact me? And I always advise, hey, you contact him first. So how did this happen for you? Were you having this kind of internal struggle on if you contacted him first, or if you should wait for him to contact you?
No, me personally, I didn't have any internal struggle. I was very comfortable with contacting him first. The toughest part for me was maintaining that 30-day time frame. I literally had to put on the calendar. I wrote it on my calendar day
Smart.
one of the no contact rule, and I wrote it on every single day of my calendar. And when I decided to, I think, break it on day 31. And so I wrote in my calendar, this is day 31, you can contact him now. I had the templates that you have available in your resource. I had that predetermined. I knew exactly what I was going to say. I had that text and draft form. All I had to do was add him as a recipient and press send on day 31. And that's what I did. So I was very comfortable with contacting him first.
And how did it go? Like, take me from the texting phase. Like, when you guys are texting, how did it go? I'm really interested to hear this part.
Oh, wow. I should have had them in advance, but I very vivid memories of it. So I did it the morning of day 31. Would you like me to mention the text that I used?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So the text that I used was the memory one. And I said,
reminds me of something.
Right. So we used to have dance parties with our three girls. He has two girls from his first marriage, and I have one. And so we used to have dance parties with our girls. I was very careful to mention a memory that didn't have any negative ties to it.
Smart.
And this one song that we used to play when we had dance parties with our girls was it. So I said, although I had not just listened to the song, I said, I just listened to this song that we used to dance to. And all I said was, it made me think of you. That was the end of it, and I sent it. And I knew I had a meeting to go to. So I sent it, I went to my meeting, and when I got back from my meeting, I just had a flood of text messages from him. He said something to the effect of, I miss you so much. I think of that song too. I've been waiting for you to contact me. It was just a flood of warmth.
Boy, that didn't take long at all. No. Basically, just tapping into that memory was enough for him to, like a volcano.
Yeah, I don't think 5 minutes passed between when I sent that text and when he responded to it. So it was almost immediate.
So, but take me like past day 31. Like, how did the texting work then? Did you maybe just advance really quickly? Because everyone after the no contact rule has like this really interesting path that they take. So
okay. I know what you mean now. Okay, so Friday morning I sent the text. Flood of like warmth and everything from him, but I intentionally traveled out of town. So I live in Pennsylvania. We both live in Pennsylvania.
I used to live literally in Pennsylvania until June, where we moved to Florida.
What part?
We lived in Bensalem, right outside of Philadelphia.
I know where that is. My husband's office is in Wayne,
Okay.
and we live in Harrisburg. Um,
Interesting. Interesting.
yeah,
So originally I'm from Texas. My wife is from Pennsylvania. I moved to Pennsylvania for her to be with her, and
yeah,
we just couldn't take the weather. That snowstorm was pretty much it for me. So I was
yeah, yep. That'll do it. That's funny. People usually leave and move for love or money, so you fall into that category too.
I am part of I'm part of that.
Yeah, very cool. So yeah, I intentionally traveled to Maryland to see one of my career mentors.
Okay.
And so Friday I texted him. He said, "Oh my goodness, I love you and I miss you. Can we get together tonight?" And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I can't. I'll be in Maryland until Sunday. And even when I get back on Sunday, it'll kind of be too late. So maybe Monday when I get back." So I kind of put it off a day. Um, and so we got together on Monday. We met at a park. He brought a bottle of wine that he had just gotten from the Philippines. So we drank wine in a park that wasn't too far from my house. And while we were so happy to see one another, I one of my contingencies and one of my stipulations was still
The
we need
therapy.
yeah, we need to talk to someone else. So I understand if for you that's a deal breaker. And I'm hoping you'll understand that for me is a deal breaker. I'm hoping we can just find something in the middle that satisfies both of us. And we did. So that Monday we got together. We determined to kind of like pause and we both would kind of go back to our respective corners and brainstorm a bit. And when we got back together later on that week and decided on how we were going to move forward. So we did end up doing therapy of sorts, but it was web based. So
Okay.
he would feel comfortable and I would feel comfortable. And we're still so happy about that.
Well, it's almost like a fairy tale type
Oh my
situation to
gosh.
be in.
Yeah.
Seriously, like that is so rare that this even happens.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious. So you do the therapy or you do the couples counseling, whatever we're calling it. So you do that, and how do things progress from there? So when does he propose?
Okay, so interesting question. The therapy that I wanted, and again, we're using that for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
The one that I wanted to go with was 6 weeks, and the one that he actually decided to go with was a 30-week program.
Okay. Well,
And
he
so,
he was taking it serious.
yeah, it was far longer than I ever expected him to want to do. So we did that, and he didn't propose. He just said, like, after we started the therapy, we realized that there were some conversations that we needed to have.
Hmm.
And after we had those, he said, let's just do it. Let's just propose and get this over with. And I said, okay, I'm ready. So we actually got married at the bar that we met at. And in Pennsylvania, you can do something that's called self-unite. You can do a self-uniting marriage. All you need are two witnesses. So we asked two friends to join us at the bar that we met at
Oh, you
about a
guys
year.
eloped. You
Yeah,
were madly in love.
we eloped. We didn't even have our rings. We worked with like a jeweler and we had to
Did you
order
go to
them.
that
So
Steven Singer place?
no, no.
I went there. I got roped into doing that. That
No.
that stupid place.
I didn't even know what that was. I see the billboards and all
I
this
hate
stuff.
Steven Singer. It's a jewelry place.
I had no idea. I just
Yeah.
continued to ask those. I was like, well, somebody hates him. I don't want to.
Right.
So I never looked into that. Now I know. No, we didn't do that. But my ring, it's absolutely gorgeous. It's rose gold. It's exactly what I wanted. And his has wood inlay in it. I call him my lumberjack. So that's another story for another time. But we were waiting for our custom rings to come in. So when we got married, we didn't even have our hardware. We just did it at the bar. We got our rings a couple weeks later. And then that's when we honeymooned in Rhode Island. So
Man, like Fast and Furious, you guys. You guys are incredible. I've never seen anything go that fast before, especially after the no contact rule. I mean, it was like one
yeah,
memory is all it took, and then bam, he wanted you back bad.
yeah. To give you a full time frame, we reunited, we reconciled in July, and then our anniversary is September 1st, and that was all in the same year. So it
Wow.
kind of fast and furious. But when we mentioned it to our daughters, they all said, "Well, it's about time, Mom and Dad. We were waiting for you to kind of come around and do that." So it
No,
worked out really well.
Now, I'm really interested in the couples counseling. You said there were a few areas that you hadn't talked about. So is it should we just not go there, or what were some of the big issues that you guys hadn't talked about in your previous relationship that maybe you needed to touch on?
We didn't really talk about children. I wasn't sure if I wanted more children, and he was sure he did not want more.
Yeah. I don't tell my wife, but I fall in that camp too.
You're not alone. You're not alone. And then we didn't talk about pets or animals. And so I knew I did not want any pets or animals, and he wasn't sure about it. So we both kind of determined, okay, no more children and no more animals. So that's a conversation we didn't think to have, I think, prior to in our first marriages. Another thing we didn't talk about was like physical intimacy, but we explored that and we determined something that would work for the two of us. We didn't consider like living arrangements, and like I did move into his house, but we never talked about how long we were going to be here, because the house we're living in now is the house that he was married in the first time. So
so there's some kind of ghosts of the previous surrounding.
Yeah, just a little.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm okay with discussing it, but we didn't determine like what that would look like. I think prior to, in his mind, he thought, well, we have the future to talk about that. But I felt more comfortable talking about a time frame. Time frames freaked him out, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And me being a recovering perfectionist, time frames are very important to me. So now we've established that time frames are okay for certain things and time frames are not okay for other things. So that ended up being a huge thing that we just hadn't explored prior to our breakup, that we were able to kind of comfortably explore after we reconciled.
Yeah. I remember. So it's really crazy. This, when I was first introduced to you, I have a VA, or Leia is my VA. She goes through all of the emails and she kind of sorts them into what I should see. And I remember she sent me one thing from you a long time ago, and it was something to do with, what was it? It was something to do with like, if you get your ex back, what should you do to make sure the relationship is good? You know? And so I was going through today trying to prepare a little bit. I wanted to come in blind, but I wanted to prepare a little bit so I kind of wasn't completely blind, you know? And I stumbled across this email, and I remember thinking, oh, I remember getting that. And I remember like being so busy. It just like was like, I didn't even pay attention. But it's interesting that you brought that up. And it's interesting that I remembered that, because I'm going to give you what I've learned from interviewing actual experts. And the same guy who I was talking to about that, you know, he interviewed 200 couples and was talking about therapy and how the good couples have to do therapy even when times are good. He also told me something. He also taught me something really interesting, and it was the fact that crap, I just forgot it. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh my gosh, that does happen to me. You're human. It's okay.
So he taught me something really interesting, and it was the fact that you have to be able to have these very, very difficult conversations you know where your partner is going to overreact, or where your partner could potentially be upset and angry, and you have to create a safe space to have the conversation in, and you have to be willing to have this kind of communication and both parties understand that you're not going to leave the relationship. Yeah. You have to be willing to do that. And I can't agree with that more, because so many times we shy away from the conversations that you know for a fact your partner is not going to like. And a really perfect example is the therapy, which caused your breakup. You know, so I think if you were to ask me, like you did in the email, that would be the best tip I've got off the top of my head for you.
Yeah, the therapy, you have to kind of like know what trigger words are for your partner too. So for my husband and I now, I don't even know if he's aware, but I try to remind myself and him when we're having those conversations that might not be the easiest to have, to remind myself and him we're on the same team. No matter the outcome of this conversation, we will always be on the same team. I will always be his ally. And when I remember, I try to always hold hands when we're having those conversations. So it doesn't happen all the time. But that
also you have to, if your husband's listening, he knows if you're holding his hand, it's a bad conversation.
lying on the couch, so he's he knows. But even telling him that I used your book, I was kind of nervous.
Most people are. I
Yeah,
find
because I
they're.
didn't want him to think I was being manipulative or anything like that. But interestingly, when I shared with him that it was because of your book, that's the only reason why I text him is because of your book. I promise you, because we both can be very, very stubborn.
Mm.
And if I hadn't had a roadmap, and you mentioned that in the beginning of your book too, if I hadn't had a specific plan and roadmap, we would not be together today because I didn't have the tools otherwise to approach it in a very strategic and intentional way. So for that, I'm eternally grateful. He is too. I don't even. He is
Well,
too. We've had discussions about this.
well, yeah, he's probably the first male that I've ever seen have the guts to get in front of a camera and give a testimonial.
Okay.
And if you're listening, I'm definitely going to post the testimonial in the show notes. So if you want to see it, you can see it. But he's literally the only one. And we had someone, I think her name was Maureen. She was one of like the very first success stories I ever got, and she got her ex back, and now she's married to him. But he wasn't getting in there for that, and I don't even know if she told him. She was getting her to get the video testimonial to me was challenging. I just asked for it, but I think she was maybe hadn't told her husband yet, and maybe was worried about how he'd react to your point, what you just said. It can be a little. I've seen different reactions for when men find out. Some of them don't care. Some of them are kind of like your husband, grateful a little bit, and some of them just think it's manipulative. So
Yeah.
I know a lot of women do keep it a secret, and it's really interesting. My website does not share well on social media because who wants to let their ex know that they're trying to get them back, So
Well, yeah, even when I shared it with, like, I've had friends who've experienced breakups or versions of that since I've read your book, and I've suggested it to them. And even some of my female friends, even with them wanting to get back with their exes, they just had a tough time with the title. But I let them know, I did not give them my copy. I said, I refuse. I want to support what he's doing. So you gotta buy your own copy. I'm not going to give it to you. But it made all the difference for us. And for anyone nervous about whether they should share it, one of my new personal themes is authenticity. I shared that is because I love my husband so much. And even with him being okay with me sharing it with him and doing the video testimonial, that kind of speaks to how amazing he is. And so I think with me being authentic and just sharing that I was desperate, I loved you so much, and I didn't have the language or the words or the tools to share that with you, but also let him know how important it was to have some of those crucial conversations. He was very open to it. I think my authenticity kind of lended itself to that. So anyone who's nervous, just be authentic and say, this is the reason why I'm doing it. It's because you mean so much to me. And it might help the news get to them a little bit softer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to look at things. Unfortunately, it's hard to get people to look at it that way. You're definitely, I'm really excited to share this with people because hope, you're giving people hope here, and people are just, we were dealing with some women who are just hanging on by a thread. So every single article that we put out, they're just like hanging on by a thread. So I'm really glad to be sharing this kind of success with people, that it is possible to have this kind of an ending to your love story, so to speak. But let me ask you, how are things now? Better than ever?
Amazing. We call our love, I don't know if he wants to chime in, we call our love honey dripping love. That's how easy it is. That's the hashtag on all of my Instagram posts with him. So it's absolutely amazing. We lie in bed sometimes and we think we are so grateful. We want to share this opportunity with others. I mean, it was definitely your book and other things too, but I think the openness from me and from him, and like you said, the hope that we had, we just knew that we wanted to make this work. It didn't hurt that we had like terrible first marriages under our belt. And while we were scared, terrified that history might repeat itself, we also had glimpses that it's absolutely possible to find true honey dripping love again. And we're so grateful for it. We are so in love, and we're very intentional to make sure that in love feeling lasts into the future. Some people discount that, but again, you have two very strong-willed people determined that our love is going to last into the indefinite future. So
Yeah, and it's actually kind of a blessing that you did get the couples counseling, because like I said, that is one of the best things you can do to just kind of examine the situation you're in. And it's probably good to have those kind of conversations, especially about kids. You know, it's a huge type of life-changing event. And I know you have one, and you said he has two, but still adding another one to the mix, I mean, that, how much can you handle? I mean, I have one, and it's like a full-time job, you know? So,
yeah, that too, you spoke to something very important. We have so much divorce. There's a lot of divorce in my family's past, and there's a lot of divorce in my husband's family's past. And more than anything, we wanted to show our girls that it's possible for this to work. And so even if we have variances of opinions now in front of our girls, we do group family hugs to say, you know, you're not always going to see things eye to eye, but we can always resolve things, and we're still going to have the love, and no matter what happens, we will continue to be on the same team. So we are trying to display that for our girls no matter what.
yeah, it seems like you have a really good head on your shoulders, and I'm glad that you're willing to like talk about this kind of stuff to him, but also kind of be a really good role model for your children. I mean, that's a big deal. You know, growing up, like you just mentioned, I know one of my wife's big things was that she had to marry a guy who had no divorce in his family because she thought that would increase the chances. So luckily my parents are still married and her parents are still married, but it can be, you know, you touch a lot of good points here for a lot of people. So I'm glad that you're willing to like understand that and see that and admit it, because a lot of people will just push it off to the side and not even bring it up and try to solve it, which is kind of what you're doing.
And you mentioned that, and a lot of that I think has to do with like embarrassment and fear, because there are a lot of times when, as a society, especially with millennials, the posts you see are people having so much fun or people in love for the moment. And I'm grateful because my husband was open to, initially I don't think he was, but now we're open to saying like, these are our scars. This is what, we don't have a perfect past. We have lots of like imperfect things going on in our lives, but we are dedicated to making our future more beautiful with every passing day. So
yeah,
we got over feeling embarrassed, I guess.
Well, it's a beautiful thought too, because just bearing your soul to someone else really can work wonders for building trust, because bearing your soul to someone else, like, this is not something that I do pretty much ever, you know? So having the person there to experience it's a big deal, and it feels good. So it does nothing but good things, in my opinion. So I'm glad that you have the courage to do that. And I'm so happy for you, Jessy, and your husband.
Thank you. Well, I will say too, we're at different paths. My husband sometimes says, you divulge too much. So I do want to say that I'm grateful to him because he was open to that. I think in the past, he might not have shared as much. But now, again, we're just kind of going through things hand in hand. And I'm grateful to him for that, because for me, it's important. I used to suffer from wanting to be perfect and not wanting to ever admit when things weren't going well. And he's open to that. So he's the man. I love him.
I can tell you've said it about 20 times. I'm glad to see you happy, because it's not a face that I end up seeing a lot. I usually get the emails of people that are going through the hardest times. So it's a nice change of pace for me to see someone who's genuinely happy.
Yeah, so, and I did have hard times. I cried. When we first got back together, my mother was not in favor because she had only seen, not only, her most recent memories of my relationship with him was the painful ones. So initially she was nervous. She thought, I don't want you to get hurt again, and I don't want your hurt to be sourced from him. So yeah, I had some painful moments, a lot of tears that I didn't allow for him to see, again, because I have a strong will. But yeah, so there's a lot of pain there. We are on the side of happiness.
Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode. This was a blast, Jessy, Is there any parting words of wisdom that you want to tell anyone listening to this? It's okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, good.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. What did you just say?
I was just saying I think this is a good stopping point, and
Yeah.
is there any kind of parting words of wisdom you want to tell anyone listening?
Oh my goodness. Again, your book is at the perfect. I don't know. My apprehensions were cost and it possibly being a waste of money. I would definitely encourage anyone to just give it a try. The worst that could happen is, I don't know about you, but I've quote unquote wasted money on worse things, food, revelry, I don't know, you name it. I've wasted money on worse things, and I gave this a try and I took a risk, and it was a very, very modest risk. Again, I love the price point of your resources. Give it a try and see how it works. Really, there's not much that could go wrong.
No, it's all good. And by the way, I'm totally leaving this in. I feel like it makes things more real for people, to realize that we're not perfect, so don't worry about it.
As long as you didn't, there were a couple expletives in there.
No,
Sorry,
you're good. You're good.